Okay, let's step back to where the rift happened in the Oswald the Lucky Rabbit incident.
Let's go back.
So Disney created Oswald for Universal and then split with Universal, but Universal still owned Oswald, like I said, and they wanted to keep cashing in on it. So the guy who owned the rights to Oswald was the head of Universal, Carl Laemmle. So in the early days of animation, the big studios didn't have their own departments. They would just buy cartoons from independent, devoted animation studios. So Laemmle just contracted a different company to make the Oswald cartoons. Two of the animators he hired to do this were Hugh Harman and Rudolph Ising, both of whom used to work for Disney.
Yeah.
So Harman and Ising saw an opportunity and decided to go straight to Laemmle and convince him to buy their cartoons straight from them and cut out the middleman. And Laemmle decided this isn't a bad idea. So he fired all of them and opened up his own studio. It was led by Walter Lantz, and it was called Walter Lantz Studios. This was in 1929. They took up the mantle of Oswald, the Lucky Rabbit, and they also went on to create Woody Woodpecker.
And Andy Panda and Chili Willy, too.
Yeah, those names that we all know and love.
I love Chili Willy. I do love Chili Willy. I only know Andy Panda from like a figure that is in some vintage shop that I'm like, I needed to have that thing.
I need to do a podcast on their cartoon series. It was called Cartoon Classics.
Oh, yeah.
T-U-N-E.
I get it. Cute.
Cartoon Classics, it was just a ripoff of Disney's Silly Symphonies.
Right. They all were.
They all were. So now Harman and Ising were out of a job. So they joined up with a man named Fritz Freeling. He also worked for Disney, and they approached Warner Brothers Studios. And with the help of a producer named Leon Schlesinger, whose voice later became the inspiration for the voice of Daffy Duck.
He inspired
He was a big inspiration for Daffy Duck.
Are you sure Daffy Duck and not Porky Pig?
His voice was Daffy Duck. His body was Porky Pig. I think he just
really?
Like,
oh, yeah, that makes sense because he's fat.
Yeah, his tongue was made out of butter. Warner Brothers agreed to start making cartoons under the stipulation that the focus of them be on synchronized sound, and in doing so, each one had to feature a song from the Warner Brothers catalog as a way of both cutting costs and promoting their music catalog. Right. So in 1930, the very first Looney Tunes, which is another ripoff of Silly Symphonies, it came out with Sinkin' in the Bathtub, starring Bosco, who was a Mickey ripoff that actually predates Mickey. And the cartoon itself was also very much like a Mickey cartoon. And from then on, they churned out one Looney Tune every month.
Okay.
And at the very end of this first one, Sinkin' in the Bathtub, Bosco walks onto screen, he looks straight at the camera, and he says, "That's all, folks."
Oh, my God.
He doesn't say it like that.
Wow.
I do.
How haunting that is. That's all, folks.
So they liked that, I guess, and they kept that as their catchphrase forever. So as the Looney Tunes became more popular, Warner Brothers introduced a new monthly series called Merry Melodies in 1931. So all this was in black and white until 1934. Merry Melodies switched to color, but Looney Tunes stayed black and white until 1943. But all the color ones we see, in the 60s, all the old Looney Tunes were sent to Japan to be colorized, but most of the original cells had been burnt by the studio just to make room, so they had to remake all of them all over again and then colorize them.
Wow.
Yeah. In the beginning, Merry Melodies were all about the music, but Looney Tunes was more story-driven.
Yeah.
But eventually the two names just became interchangeable.
Yeah.
So these were the days before Warner Brothers were headquartered in Burbank. So the place where all this was happening was at 5800 Sunset Boulevard. It's where the Sunset Bronson and the KTLA 5 studios are now.
Yeah, I thought so.
Yeah, you were right. I'm sorry.
It's between the two Denny's.
Reginald and he's back. The riots are here.
Reginald Denny and the other Reginald Denny.
So Warner Brothers didn't have as much money to compete with the style and the class of Disney, so they set out to be the funniest cartoons.
And they were.
Harman and Ising eventually left Warner Brothers in 1933 to go to MGM, which we'll get to later.
Yeah.
So to replace them, Schlesinger hired... See, even his name. That's Daffy Duck.
It is Daffy Duck, you're right.
They hired Bob Clampett and Chuck Jones. So a little bit about Chuck Jones. I'm sure you're going to have more to add. Chuck Jones became the driving force of Warner Cartoons. He was raised in Hollywood, graduated from Chouinard Art Institute, which used to be at 741 South Grandview near MacArthur Park.
Okay.
But once Disney got a hold of it in 1961, he merged it with the Los Angeles Conservatory of Music, and they formed the California Institute of the Arts in Valencia. CalArts, as you will, as the kids call it.
Yeah.
After graduating, Jones would draw portraits on Olvera Street for $1 until he got his first job in 1932 as a cell washer for Oob Eyeworks over at MGM. We'll get to that also. Cell washers, Did you read about what they're...
Yeah,
They would wash the cells. The cells were like 4 cents each, but to keep the cost down, they would reuse them, so they'd wash them all clean afterwards. Some of the cells that survived are sold for like hundreds of thousands of dollars, and they're all down the drain.
I would pay that money just to wash one of them.
I would pay that money to watch Chuck Jones washing a cell.
It's a young scrap.
Jones created pretty much all the iconic Warner characters: Wile E. Coyote, Roadrunner, Pepe Le Pew, Elmer Fudd, Bugs Bunny, Daffy Duck. His team, they went on to create the first real cartoon star in 1935's I Haven't Got a Hat with Porky Pig.
And the ones that he didn't create, he sort of raised as his own too. Yes. Chuck Jones grew up in Hollywood. He was born in Spokane.
I said this.
Do you know where he lived in Hollywood? He lived near La Brea and Sunset, which is really close. He said 2 blocks away from Chaplin Studios, and he would sneak up through the fence and watch Chaplin rehearse things.
That's
so cool. Chaplin would fall down and get back up and fall down again and get back up, and he would sneak and he'd sneak and watch Chaplin do this over and over.
He thought he was a clumsy old man.
He would watch Mary Pickford ride by on a white horse because she was part of the honorary.
On her way to get a chili burger. Just trailing ice cream sundaes behind her.
Yeah, she was part of some parade, so he just watched Mary Pickford from his porch. And then I think they moved back to Newport Beach, and he's incredibly well read. He reads he read a lot of he's the biggest fan of Chaplin and Keaton. He loves those. But on top of that, he loves Mark Twain. He's the biggest Mark Twain fan, and he puts a lot of that into the Looney Tunes. Even Wile E. Coyote is based on a quote from Twain from Roughing It about how a coyote...
I'll get that Roadrunner if it's the last thing I do.
Have you read it? It's very... No. Twain said in Roughing It how the coyote is the manifestation of hunger, and even if he has to go 150 miles to get food, he'll do it, and he admires
and
that.
And they're surprisingly resistant to anvils. I say.
Those coyotes will just order product after product after product until they get their way.
Did he come up with Foghorn Leghorn? Because if he likes Mark Twain, he would love Foghorn Leghorn.
No, he didn't. I think Robert Kimpson did. What we're talking about right now is the building of a dream team, basically, which leads to Termite Terrace.
It's kind of like the Avengers, not those ones.
The ones from Britain, the 2 spies. Call now, brown cow.
So,
how old are we? Tale as old as time, a song as old as rhyme.
Beauty
Meekly
and the Beauty? While Chuck Jones was becoming a star, meanwhile, at Walter Lance's studio back at Universal, there was this kid low on the totem pole from Texas named Frederick Bean Avery, a.k.a. Tex Avery, and he got an opportunity to rise up through the ranks after Disney raided the staff at Universal, and he was able to rise up and get the experience he needed to apply and get accepted at Warner Brothers in 1936. He made his Warner Brothers debut that year with Gold Diggers of 49. Tex Avery, he had a very surreal style, and he completely redefined what a cartoon could be. And supposedly Disney didn't want his animators to see any of Avery's stuff because it was too extreme in its humor and animation style.
Extreme is I don't want to say it's a light way to put it, but it's insane. His cartoons, I remember when I was a kid, they used to have a special, it was the Tex Avery Hour, and I knew this is going to be good.
Yeah, the wolf.
The wolf, yeah.
The wolf.
He had such a defined style that even as a kid I knew this is a Tex Avery cartoon because it's insane and
because it says so.
So it says so, yeah. Also they have a song about it. It's capped off.
Mom, I think this is a Tex Avery.
This is in the hour of Tex Avery. I hope it's a Tex Avery cartoon.
3:00. It's Tex Avery hour. He was irreverent. He was modern. He was shockingly modern. When you watch them now, it's weird to think that these were made in the 30s, and it's really funny. It's just really funny.
Compare it to what Silly Symphonies was doing.
You can tell that is old.
Yeah. In 1937, they did Disney did the Old Mill, which is really slow moving thing that zooms in, and it's really beautiful, and it goes from animal to animal, and it's about animals living in this old mill, and the camera moves, and it's really beautiful, and it tells a kind of frightening story, but in the end everything warms up. Compare that to 37 when Freeling and Avery are just slamming everything against the wall with it. I mean, Avery would say stuff like, people like to see things demolished as long as at the end you pick it all back up, but they love to see this insane cartoon violence, and that's what he gave us.
Well, it was the Depression. Also in 1936, that same year, a radio voice actor named Mel Blanc joined Warner Brothers to provide the voices for pretty much every character they made, including Bugs Bunny, Daffy Duck, Porky, Tweety, Sylvester, Foghorn Leghorn, and the Roadrunner, which is weird to give him credit for the Roadrunner. He was the first voice actor to have his name in the credits, and these 4 men were they're like the Beatles of animation. Yeah. And that same year, the animation department at Warner Brothers was officially dubbed Termite Terrace.
You're forgetting one of the most important pieces was Carl Stalling, who did all the music for them too, and the music is just so wonderful.
I didn't forget him.
Termite Terrace to me is like dream team stuff. Like they were working on that little lot in these hot bungalows, and they claimed to, I don't know if they were mistreated or not, but I know that they were.
The bungalows claimed to be mistreated?
The bungalows were mistreated. Schlesinger didn't really give them a lot of attention. Like, he was just like, whatever, you guys do whatever you want. So Freeling was the head of the department. He was insane just as much as anybody else. Him and Clampett, like, pretty much created the most insane character, to me anyways, which is early Daffy Duck, which is just babbling bipolar madness. And he's just, whoa, 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 whoa. Like, he's just hopping. If you watch, like, The Great Piggy Bank, what's it called?
It's The Great Piggy Bank, Charlie Brown?
Yeah, it's A Great Piggy Bank, Charlie Brown. He's just so insane in the beginning. Like, he's waiting for the mail of his Dick Tracy comic to come in. And he's just, like, like, he's just insane. And I love it. Chuck Jones would always say, like, Bugs was the winner, but Daffy was clearly the loser. So he was able to get away with more. But that's when Chuck Jones took it over. Before that, he was Insanity's baby being Freeling.
Is he a priest?
Clampett. Who?
Daffy Duck, because he has that white thing around his neck.
You didn't know that?
No.
Everybody confesses to him.
Oh, you're right. Boy. Second question, what's a priest?
Disney was very sentimental about everything, and Termite Terrace was all about humor. They were one of like the first animation to concentrate just on comedy writing. They were like brainstorming and gag stuff, and they were all very funny. Timing and angles. They were so...
Angles are funny.
Angles are
funny.
That
is funny.
I know you're making fun of me, but angles, there are some angles that are just faces. Funny. Angles with dirty spaces. Damn it. I'm not getting it.
What I heard was that Tex Avery eventually had one eye.
Oh, yeah. No, that happened like a lot earlier. I think that happened.
I heard it happened in Termite Terrace. They were throwing like paper clips around, and one of them hit him in the eye.
And a lot of critics have come to say that lends to his lack of perception or depth in his cartoons. They're all flat because he only has one eye. I don't think so, but whatever.
That's why he never made a 3D cartoon.
But him and Clampett and Jones, they really defined that style really early on, and people were like clamoring to copy that. Here's another thing about them. There's like 4 or 5 formulas for like Looney Tunes and Merry Melodies, but they weren't meant for like binge watching. Like, we weren't meant to watch them all at once, so like getting sick of them now is not what it was then.
Yeah, you'd only see one a month in between watching your dad get killed by a Nazi and watching Humphrey Bogart kiss your girlfriend.
And that was another thing, thank you. You know, they were on the MGM lot. They didn't have a lot of money to create the worlds that Walt Disney was, because he was already rich from Snow White and everything like that. And he already owned Technicolor and stuff. Like, he owned all the color in the world. But they had to rely on their wits.
The whole world was black and white for a few years.
But they were on the lot with like Bogart and James Cagney, so their cartoons are also a lot of like attitude too. Bugs is basically just like Groucho Marx. Like, he's just a Marx brother.
Instead of a cigar, he has a carrot.
There we go. Wow.
And instead of a human, he's a bunny. Oh, I get it now.
Bugs Bunny, I get it.
Oh, Bugsby Bunny.
Bugsby Bunny. Yeah. So they were attitude, they were humor. It was...
What's up, doctor? I get it.
What's up, physician?
How's it going, surgeon?
Yeah, Termite Terrace was really where they made their best stuff. And once they got more money and they gave Chuck Jones his way, I think that they started to transform. And I don't want to say they were less funny, but they were less insane. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they were less about...
money makes you sane. If I've seen Citizen Sane, I know that money makes you sane.
Yeah, it makes you sane.
Yeah.
Termite Terrace, they used to do Christmas reels, which was a gag thing every year at Christmas. It was just like a mock documentary sort of thing that they released, and they'd have like Mal Blanc would do the voiceovers for everything. Like, look at how happy they all are going into work, and they're all miserable. And boy, they don't want to leave early today. They're all running out of the studio. But one of the things that really strikes me, other than the humor, and it's all live action, and they're starring in their own thing, and they get Schlesinger to like make fun of himself, which was apparently really hard to do.
What's to make fun of? He's only a bald, morbidly obese man that looks like a cartoon pig.
And has way too much power for someone in his position who doesn't care about any of the output at all. They would make fun of the girls who worked in the studio who were like sound washers, and they would make fun of them by dressing up as them in the video and pretending that to be this washing cells that were like not used yet. So what I'm getting at is they would all dress up like girls, and it was not homoerotic. That's the same attitude that goes towards Bugs when he dresses up like a girl. Like, it's pranksterish.
Yeah, it's sexy.
It's sexy, yeah. I wonder, like, where's she from? She's new. Look at that cottontail on her.
Look at the way she eats that carrot.
So they were as funny as the cartoons they were putting out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Another thing about you were saying how women were washing cells or whatever.
Yeah.
It seemed like the inking and like the inking department pretty much. It seemed like they were all women. Like that's the job that like women certainly can't draw cartoons. That would be absurd. But all the women were like working in the inking department.
Yeah.
Walt Disney's wife was like inker.
Was she really?
He met her in the inking department.
Talking about wives, you know that Walter Lance's wife did the voice for Woody Woodpecker. And
talking about wives, take my wife, please.
She auditioned without him knowing, and she just submitted her voice.
That's right.
And then he's like, "Who is this girl? Give her to me before my wife finds out."
What? Vomits.
Also, since we're talking about women, and there aren't a lot in this animation world at the time.
Let's do a whole other podcast about women. I think we know a lot.
I want to give a shout out to Mary Blair, who I love a lot, who worked on illustrations for, I know she did Peter Pan illustrations. I don't know if she did animation, but she definitely helped with design and storyboarding and backgrounds probably.
My next question, why don't you marry her?
She's dead.
I don't see a problem here.
You own a shovel? No.
Haven't you seen Frankenstein? You know, the guy who plays the mighty Wurlitzer in the downtown theater district. In 1940, Avery, back to what was going on at Termite Terrace, Avery made a wild hare, which defined the character of Bugs Bunny. He had appeared in 3 earlier cartoons, but this was the one that, like, oh yeah, that's him.
Yeah.
This is the bunny.
He also gave him not only attitude, but he had his phrase, which, we're all crazy about.
What's up, doctor?
What's up, doctor? Which was a phrase in the South that when they used it in the cartoon, like people were rolling, laughing, like they couldn't believe that this bunny rabbit just said "What's up, doc?" Like it was the funniest thing to them, and we take it for granted because it's hackneyed and weird and old, and I don't get it, and it's from the South, and nothing from the South is good.
No, except for
the
Yankee
South.
beans.
Yankee
beans. Those are
the Confederacy.
The South will rise again. So with Bugs Bunny, it cemented Warner Brothers. Yeah. Everyone said, oh yeah, Warner Brothers, they're the funniest. Yeah. These are the funny cartoons. And then gag cartoons became king of everybody.
Yeah.
Even Disney, which like we said before, around this time, he was going through some rough times. Pinocchio was a failure. Fantasia was a failure. He was making all this World War II stuff. He was weird. Even Disney started to imitate the style of Termite Terrace.
I got a feeling that Goofy was trying to be a lot of Warner Brothers stuff, and after a while maybe like Daffy, not Daffy, God,
Donald.
You get the feeling that
for like 2 hours today I was having like flashcards of Donald and Daffy.
But yeah, Donald becomes, I like Donald's cartoons a lot, like Donald's Diary and Donald Gets Drafted. I like those a lot, but it does seem like they're like, oh, we could be funny too, watch, we're gonna be funny.
Yeah. And I was watching a Goofy thing, and I was thinking, did Warner Brothers do Goofy?
Mickey cartoons, which I like too, like the black and white ones, are fun and adventure-y.
They're pleasant.
I like them. I like them a lot. I like the design of Mickey the Mouse in a certain era when he's black and white. Like, what's the one where he's like flying a plane? I forgot. I see it. They're not as memorable to me, but I like the design. It's King Kong. I don't want to put down Disney cartoons because I like the Wonderful World of Color when I watched it as a kid.
It's easy to put down Disney, but it's hard to put them down.
They were not good at being as funny because they had so much creative restrictions, and they weren't as mean-spirited as these horny young men.
This was the pinnacle of Warner Brothers.
Yeah.
So let's step back again and take it back to Disney again. Everything stemmed from Disney to see how the third major animation studio is formed. So MGM, it was located at 10202 Washington Boulevard in Culver City. It's now Sony Studios. They didn't want to get left out of the animation game, so they approached Disney and they offered to distribute his cartoons, but Disney was already partnered with RKO, actually, our logo. So they instead approached the former right-hand man of Disney who had left to start his own company and failed, Oob. It was Oob again. Oob Iwerks.
He won't give up.
No.
Good.
Oob, he couldn't come up with any characters that stuck out, so he left MGM.
Mm-hmm.
And after a couple of years, and he went groveling back to Disney. But that was fortunate for us, because then to replace him, MGM in 1934 went after some more ex-Disney man, and he tempted Harmon and Ising away from Warner Brothers and put MGM on the map with their very own Silly Symphonies knockoff, Happy Harmonies.
Okay.
So in 1942, Tex Avery got into a fight with Schlesinger at Warner Brothers about he wanted to do a series where it was real. They filmed real animals talking with cartoon mouths.
Oh, okay.
And for even suggesting this, he got suspended for 8 weeks from Warner Brothers.
How does Tex Avery get suspended?
He walked into the office. I got this idea. He pitches it. Just silence. You're suspended. Get out of here.
You, the creator of cartoon violence, are suspended.
That's how he lost his eye. He threw a paperclip at him.
Only thing in arm's reach.
So instead of coming back after his suspension, Avery instead sold this idea to Paramount, where it eventually won an Oscar, and then he settled into his new home at MGM. So this started the period of dominance for MGM, where they won the Oscar for Best Cartoon 1943 through 1946. This was when Avery debuted The Wolf. He created his first breakout character in 1943's Dumbhounded with Droopy.
Droopy.
Yeah, hang on, Droopy. Droopy. Win an Oscar.
He also did stuff like Rockabye Bear. When did he do
dogs? He loved dogs.
He loved dogs. He did Patience Glory a lot earlier, but that's a fun thing too. But The Wolf, Red Hot Riding Hood, and Droopy are his 3. Like that's his 3 big ones. Other than like he created an added attitude to Bugs, but like it's really. Yeah. Oh no, what's the other one? Screwy Squirrel is another one of his. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Screwy Squirrel is another big one. Yeah, that's a lot of good characters.
Yeah, but Droopy was the only one that really like. I mean, nobody has like a wolf doll. They have 2.
Yeah, we're all gonna rush to Droopy.
I want a character my kids can look up to. So, something depressed.
Something like lethargic. Those cartoons are really funny too. Like there's a lot of those cartoons where, one character's trying to get away from another one. He'll throw him in a cage and throw him underwater. Then he'll take like a power boat to a hot air balloon. He'll get on a plane and he'll go into the Amazon and hide in a cave. But the funny thing about it is like the wolf is so extreme in his fright, and Droopy is just so like, I'm here again. Like it's like the.
I think I read him described as Droopy is like in a world of exclamation points. Droopy is a semicolon.
Oh, that's perfect.
With all these studios doing what they were doing, this was the pinnacle of animation's golden age. But after World War II, things slowly started to go downhill. Production costs were rising. Tastes were changing. And a new competitor came along, TV.
Oh, that's right.
Television.
A lot of people didn't like I know John Hubley from UPA thought like TV was just trash and had no style and couldn't hold, didn't deserve to hold anybody's attention. It didn't have any like artistic value. And he obviously never saw like the Jetsons, UPA was like ran during that era. I mean, they ran alongside a lot of like Married Melodies. They came out of the Married Melodies. Yeah, UPA was something completely different. Like Fritz Freeling was saying, like, when I die, I want to go to heaven. I want to go to UPA because they like set themselves apart because they were so artistic. They had their limited animation thing, which means like they concentrated more on sort of character design and making everything look unique. The problem with them though, and it became their downfall because they ran right into TV, because TV, Hanna-Barbera specifically, stole their limited animation thing. If you watch like the Flintstones, there isn't a lot of animation. There's a lot of like still characters talking. They don't need to move around all that much. The backgrounds are pretty static. If you watch Scooby-Doo, they're all dancing with just a color background with nothing specifically. Although some of the art in like the haunted houses for Scooby-Doo is beautiful. UPA is known for, like I said, all cartoon studios have their rallying mascots. This one had Mr. Magoo, who's based on W.C. Fields, who tried to sue them, and they're like, no, Magoo's different because he mutters less, and he doesn't mutter less.
I still like the idea of him showing up in a courtroom, waiting. Where is this Magoo? Show me Magoo.
They had a Magoo. They had Gerald McBoing Boing, which is a really fun cartoon that Dr. Seuss created as I think like a radio record. And then later, as their quality went downhill, although I think it's a great cartoon style, is a Dick Tracy cartoons that they put out, although incredibly racist,
as everything has.
Yeah, they had a great modern style, and their like cartooning was from like comic cartooning, like it was all shorthand illustration stuff like that. And leading the way with them was John Hubley. They had 3 guys from Disney: Zach Schwartz, Dave Hilberman, and Steve Bostostow. I don't know how to say his name. They also had Bill Melendez on, who like later would do Peanuts. He would do the Peanuts cartoons. Yeah, Bill Melendez was really great. And they really challenged like the realistic look of Disney, and they infused social commentary and stuff. They had that Rudy Toot Toot one, which is it's like a trial. This woman's killed this guy because she found a different lover, and it's just so unique. It's just so unique. Like there's a lot of colors, the backgrounds all over the place. It's very stylized, and it's really interesting. Their 2 biggest things with them was that no talking animals and no cartoon violence. Although Rudy Toot has 2 people dead by the end of it. It's kind of a crime story.
But they're not animals.
They're not animals. Okay. Yeah, it doesn't matter. So in 42, they hook up with Frank Tashlin, who's one of the Termite Terrace guys who helped create one of the better versions of Daffy Duck, and would later go on to
Donald Duck.
Donald Duck. He was one of the few guys that moved from animation to live action. He found a perfect segue with Jerry Lewis movie, like early Jerry Lewis movies. He did Hollywood or Bust, and I think he did The Ladies' Man. And Jerry's like animated as like Daffy Duck is. So he found a perfect event for all that animated angst. Oh, animated angst, I like that. So they're at Columbia, and then Tashlin gets in a fight with the heads of Columbia. So they do some cartoons together, like the Professor Small and Tall and Fox and the Grapes, but then eventually Tashlin leaves, and I think Hubley and someone else Buster Stout goes with them. At that point, they start working with the military thing, FMPU. So in 43, there were some guys who weren't part of that whole thing. Buster Stout, I think, might have been part of the Tashlin Columbia fiasco, but Hilberman and Zach Schwartz, they formed something called Industrial Film and Poster Service, which is the earliest incarnation of UPA. They were just doing stuff to like graphic arts sort of stuff. And they were all really skilled craftsmen, and they had like a definitive style they wanted to pronounce. So working at Disney was not going to work for them anyways. So they were just getting into graphic arts. I lucky enough to attend this UPA like film festival before I even knew what UPA was. I just went because I'm something with Ward Kimball. I'm like, I have to be there for Ward Kimball is one of the Disney animators who was one of the 9 old men. Reading about Disney and how he's Daddy Disney and everything, you kind of get the feeling like, oh, Merry Melodies and all these other studios are about, well, it's particularly about Merry Melodies and Looney Tunes and Termite Terrace. It's about following like what animators were creating what characters and like their own spin. Like Clampett's Bugs Bunny was different than Chuck Jones's Bugs Bunny. So you're kind of following animators. And it kind of felt like once you left Disney, you were able to establish yourself as an animator, because if you're working at Disney, you don't really get known. Because of all the Silly Symphonies and the Mickey shorts, nobody really stood out as an animator. And then I'm like, okay, well, that's how it is. But I forgot that Disney has the 9 old men, which is 9 animators who really made a name for themselves, and they worked on some of the best, not only like features, but like a lot of shorts and stuff. Between Snow White to The Rescuers, you had Les Clark, Mitt Call, Mark Davis, Eric Larson, John Lunsberry, Wolfgang Reitherman, and then the 3 that I really like, Frank Thomas, Ollie Johnston, who became known as Frank and Ollie, like a really good team. Like they worked together for a really long time, and there's like homages to them in The Incredibles, which is really funny. And then my favorite of all of them is Ward Kimball, who is one of the silliest, weirdest animators. Like he like was a living version of his own cartoons. He put his stamp on like Jiminy Cricket.
Jimmy the Cricket?
Jimmy the Cricket. The Mad Hatter was his, and he kind of like had like the energy of the Mad Hatter and everything. Yeah, and he also did the Penguin. What's the Penguins band name in Mary Poppins? I always forget what they're called.
Dick Van Dyke.
Dick Van Dyke. Yeah, and then Frank Thomas was known for like doing Captain Hook and the Queen of Hearts. There were just 9 animators who really stuck out. But Ward Kimball, my God, Ward Kimball was just so much fun. And he was like, played trumpet. Him and Walt Disney were like really good friends. And Ward Kimball was on the Groucho Marx. What was that Groucho Marx show where he asked a bunch of questions?
Your Life?
I think it was You Bet Your Life. And Ward Kimball and his wife came on. He's just really funny and kooky and looks old from like a really young age, looks really old and kind of goofy. That's definitely like the energy that I like to think about when I think about good Disney, is that kind of Mad Hatter, Ward Kimball energy. That's all. Anyways, Ward Kimball was part of this. I ended up at the UPA thing. Mr. Magoo cartoons are really funny. They're not like my favorite. The whole concept of he's nearsighted. He has no idea what's happening. He always has some vague idea of what's actually going on. But you're watching like what everyone else sees in Mr. Magoo. It's really funny. And Joe McBoing Boing's just charming. It's very Dr. Seuss. Not style-wise. It looks like a comic strip you'd see in like the 40s or 50s. Everything's really simplistic, but it has the rhythm and the
Seuss.
Oh, it's Seuss, and it has also the outcome of a typical Seuss thing, which is usually very cheerful and triumphant, like Horton Hears.
A what?
Horton Hatches the Egg is the one I was thinking of.
Horton Hatches a Who?
Yeah, Horton Hatches a Who. They do really well for themselves, and everyone. It's sort of like the way they say Pet Sounds is every musician's favorite album. Like UPA is basically a lot of animators' favorite
every musician's
studio.
favorite studio.
What ends up happening is, as you said, TV starts seeping in. Hubley doesn't like it at all. He doesn't like anything. He thinks that animation for TV is kind of trashy, which it is. They flourished in the 50s, but the problem with UPA is that it costs a lot of money to do what they do, and it's also time consuming because each animator is spending a lot of time with each short, and it's his style and it's his dream and it's his vision, and it costs a lot of money. So they start cutting costs. They start doing more Magoo stuff. Gerald McBoing Boing and Magoo have a cross. A Christmas cover was a big thing. They made a theatrical feature, 1001 Arabian Nights with Mr. Magoo. They made another one, Gay Puri. they're just pushing to become more commercial, and it kind of falls apart as TV because TV takes their limited animation style and they don't use it stylistically. They use it as just cutting costs, like a cost-cutting measure, because it's easier and you could just pump it out. We're gonna get to the studio that was known for
pumping it out.
They were known. They were called. Oh, you know what? Let's get to it then. TV dissolved UP basically.
Yeah. Well, TV kind of dissolved everybody.
Yeah.
When TV came around, all of the major animators were hit hard. Disney, they stopped doing short. They were stopping. By 1956, they stopped completely, and they focused only on features, live action ones, more and more at that.
Yeah, they had stuff like...
it was just so expensive.
The stuff like Don Knotts stuff, or like, what's the other Pollyanna?
The Scared Mr. Chicken. What is it? Let's Scare Mr. Chicken. What is it? Let's Scare Mr. Chicken to death.
Frighten Mr. Limpet. What the hell is it called?
Frightened Mr. Limpet.
What the hell is it called? The Ghost and the Chicken is one of them. The Incredible Mr. Limpet's the other one.
Well, that was Termite Terrace. Termite Terrace, they limped on. They finally closed in 1963. The last thing they did, though, was The Incredible Mr. Limpet.
Oh, really? That was the last thing they did?
Yeah.
I didn't know that. I thought it was a Disney thing.
Nope.
Wow. I should shut my big mouth.
That's what I was told.
I was told by Termite Terrace.